Bar staff of Reddit, have you ever had a man use the safeword drink escape, and how often does it happen? I have been in a scenario like this. I was a busboy at a local pizza/bar. So I just started my shift, and I'm clearing a table and everything, and I notice a table where a female is being extremely loud and abrasive. I walk back to the dish room and the guy knocks his drink over, so I go to get it. He hands me a napkin and pretends to help me. So I go back into the kitchen and it just says call 911. So I tell my manager and he does so. So I told his waitress to bring him another drink and to say, don't worry about the drink, accidents happen. She is getting worse and worse. And we all can hear her saying that if he tries to leave her she would kill herself. So about 12 minutes later some cops show up. The guy's in tears. When they show up, he runs to the bathroom and my boss points at the table and they take her out to the restaurant. This is where shit got wild. She begins to take her clothes off one by one to avoid being escorted out of the restaurant. So here we are during dinner rush, a naked as crazy person stripping down, running around tables screaming about her boyfriend. She got to the point where she was grabbing silverware and throwing at the cops, and they did as tackle her and put her in cuffs, dragged her naked as out to the car. The poor boyfriend is in tears in the bathroom. I go check on him and tell him what happened, and he apologized. I was like, dude, what caused all of this? He said we met on POF and this was our first date. I had no clue what to do. Point at it. Wow, thanks for the gold, guys. I will try and respond to as many of these as I can. Yep, I work in a nightclub in a small city in England in Lincolnshire. I once had a guy who seemed to only recently turned 18 ask if Angela was working. Ask for Angela is a UK scheme that helps prevent violence, sexual assaults and date rap. I knew about the Ask for Angela scheme and immediately I brought him into the glass washroom. Turns out there were a bunch of lasses encouraging this one lass into seducing him, grinding up on him, trying to kiss him and groping him. This apparently continued even after the man had walked away into other parts of the nightclub after showing and saying he wasn't interested. I had reported this to my supervisor, who was a little hesitant at first but eventually called the bouncers into the back room too. We explained the situation to them. Now these guys are basically 200 to 300 pound tanks, so you would expect to joke about this and tell this guy to man up and enjoy it, but to my surprise, they took it seriously as well. They managed to track down this group, 5 women including the one who was doing the grinding, and they escorted all of them out of the building. Meanwhile, a taxi had already been prepared by my supervisor and the taxi firm was literally down the road, so it didn't take long for it to arrive. I escorted the man through the back stairs that continues down to the stock cellar but leads off to the side exit of the building near the bins. A taxi was parked just outside. It would be a rare occasion when someone uses Ask Angela where I work, let alone a man. So I'm really glad that all of the staff took it seriously and helped as much as they could. Point at it. Wow. I didn't expect this to blow up. To those curious, it was in Lincoln. Brilliant town for a night out tbh. Here one from Eindhoven, Netherlands. I was working for a smaller bar with a mixed crowd. For both men and women we had safe drinks. Women, virgin tequila. Men, virgin vodka. In total I saw these ordered 2 times. The one that sticks with me the most was for Christmas Eve. This night we had mostly gay guys hanging around in the bar and some students. After a while of the students, got a lot of attention of one of the gay guys, GG, hand on leg, a lot of too personal questions, touching ass, and told he was straight and not interested. This got the bartender that overheard this on alert and he put a napkin on the bar near where he was sitting with a red exclamation mark. So all staff knew something was up. S goes to toilet and GG orders a round of vodka shots. Bartender didn't see S so poured the order and placed it on the bar. S comes back and GG tells him to help him empty the glasses. S starts drinking and suddenly looks very pally and sweaty. As soon as the vodka is domed, GG smiles and walks to toilet. S looks worse by the second and asks for virgin vodka. At this moment 2 of the bartenders get him to one of the other bars owned by my boss and call an ambulance. The rest of the crew created a diversion for GG as soon as he came from the toilet, telling him S left for a phone call. Ambulance noticed S seemed to be drugged. GG was drinking something else by then, watered down cocktails without him even noticing, and we alerted the police, who found 4 tubes of GHB on him. In the NGG was arrested and death rushed to hospital. Edit. Whoa, didn't expect this many reactions. Here some answers. This was indeed on Stratham's End. The bars in question, unfortunately, do not exist anymore. We called it Virgin because at this time, around 2008 to 2010, we never expected it to be used so much. Later we even changed the name every 3 months. GHB is officially a medical aid, later app drug, which is too easy to produce at home. This makes control over it even harder and the drug only more dangerous. Worked in a pub in Ireland as a bouncer. Not a common thing here to have a get me out ta here shot. So no signs or that, but there was some Facebook post calling them angel shots that did its rounds. Girls would say they've to go to us and we'd know. No code words or sheet. Anyway, one night I'm doing my thing in this nice bar and a guy approaches me in front of a group of friends being a bit boisterous from a fancy restaurant across the road, and he says he needs an angel shot. So we let them in, but I hold him there questioning his ID as his friend make fun of me and him as I'm 22. This guy was maybe 35ish and I was a kid telling a man no. So they hang about for him, so I can't ask him what's up. I tell him no, he's had too much tonight. I hail a taxi down and he pretends to resist getting in. So I basically pick him up and carry him into the taxi. He throws me 50 euros into my jacket pocket discreetly and the taxi goes off then. Nothing big. 2 days later I'm working again, same bunch of guys from the restaurant come over. The angel shot guy isn't there. 3 days later angel shot guy comes, but very early, and explains it all to me. Turns out his friends were doing coke, all professional people, and a girl was wrapped in the bathroom. He said at first she wanted to have sex with one of them, but then 2 guys came in. Then she wanted out and couldn't. This guy tried to interject, but couldn't, and then felt uncomfortable and didn't want a part of this, so wanted to leave, but was told if he did they'd hurt him. And the reason they all returned 2 days later was his going away drinks that he didn't attend. Obviously. The guys were then charged like a month later. Can't find public info on it anymore. Only time I ever had to use the get me out ta here shot. Edit. Used to have said it too. Thanks for the silvers. Wow. Good on you for jumping in and keeping him safe and also moving quickly enough to nail the bastards who drugged him. I was with my best friend and his boyfriend at our favorite gay bar one Saturday night and ordered drinks from a newer bartender who had a serious crush on my best friend. We ordered our opening shot of a buttery nipple. Little backstory. I'm a straight married woman with pierced nips. The night I got them pierced about 16 years ago, my BFF decided that we had to toast the nips with that shot, and it's been our first shot every night we go out together, lol, which is a very weak shot. Then switch to our vodka tonics. 1 shot and 1 vodka tonics, and we are all 3 faked up. I don't remember much about that night and only pieced it together afterwards from friends and video. I ended up in just my bra and jeans in my car with a blanket on me after 3 fairy drag mothers found me trying to unlock my car door. They got me safely inside my car, covered me with a blanket, tossed my keys under the spare tire wheel, well, haven't suv, and used radial on my phone to call my husband. They just thought I was drunk. My best friend was found by the police officer who worked outside the bar crawling in gravel beside the nearby railroad tracks trying to find his way home. His boyfriend ended up having a seizure on the dance floor and had an ambulance called. They had to intubate him ASAP after he stopped breathing and his throat started swelling. The officer who found my best friend knew the 3 of us well, since we were regulars, and found it suspicious that we would all be so faked up when we had just gotten there an hour before and never left bombed. So he called it in and alerted the owners and management. We didn't find out until later that night that said bartender was stalking him and had roofied the shots in hope that he would be able to get my friend alone and make sure the other 2 of us never went looking for him. He got arrested and ended up getting 3 years. I work in small cocktail bars in Sydney, Australia. Prime date night joints. We have something called Ask for Angela, where the idea is you just ask the bar staff if Angela is working tonight, and that'll be the hint to keep an eye on things or even call a cab. I've only had one customer, man or woman, ever use it. A nice younger guy on a date with an older gentleman. The issue was threefold. A venue at the time Had quite a few backpackers on working holidays that were completely unaware of this protocol. We had a lovely Chinese girl who went by Angela working that night, and that the date was going poorly in such a fashion that to the untrained eye, it looked like two work acquaintances having a drink. There was that little chemistry between them. Apparently the older gentleman followed the younger in the bathroom and copped a feel, prompting the ask for Angela. It was a huge runaround, to be honest. It took quite a while for a native English speaker to tune into the argument behind the bar, where Angela was explaining that she had no idea who this guy was. So eventually he got some help. He ordered 2 cocktails at the bar, as D. if Angela was working tonight, saying she made them the best. We ended up ordering an Uber for him while he feigned an emergency and brought their drinks out in time that the older bloke sorta felt obligated to stay and finish them just as his Uber arrived. Unfortunately a lot of bars have joined the Ask for Angela campaign. It's government sponsored, posted the signs in their ladies' rooms, and called it a day. No staff training. This is because it puts you on a government list of safe bars and, well, nobody can give up free publicity. Very disappointing. I also believe it needs to better extend to men on poor dates as well. I rarely see the posters in men's rooms, just unisex and ladies. No, but I have a slightly relevant story. Slightly. It involves a bar and a guy at least. I'm a line cook at one. I was kinda chilling in the hallway to gauge how busy we were getting so I could possibly take a break before we picked up. A very sweet, kinda nerdy guy got up from the bar and quickly walked towards the bathroom. On his way, he started crying. I walked into the bathroom with him and asked if he was okay. He said his date texted her boyfriend that he didn't know about and some of his friends to come jump the guy because he couldn't afford to pay for all 8 of her cranberry vodkas. He said she was probably serious because he was peeping at her texts as she was nodding in and out. Definitely the bartender's fault for letting her get so faked up. I told my manager. We put his tab on hold and escorted him out the back door and hid him in the owner's truck. He was drunk enough that we didn't feel comfortable letting him drive, and Uber may take too long if this is beating actually comes along, so I smoke my cigarettes and almost immediately, after walking back inside, I hear a douchebag pull in. You know, a guy doing a burnout into the parking lot in his burgundy 1996 Honda Civic with mismatched bumpers / fenders and half of the hood spray painted matte black. I grab my manager and we pretend to have a conversation outside. He walks in. He was alone thankfully, grabs the skank from the bar and walks out. They ask if we've seen the guy she was with, and we told him he was throwing up really bad, so we called him an Uber. I know we should've said no, but there were only like 5 people at the bar at the time. Everyone definitely saw him walk through the back door of the kitchen with us. Dude gets pissed off saying his girl isn't paying for the tab and starts throwing rocks at our faking windows. Owner grabs an old pool cue from the back and holds it above his head ready to kill this dude until the police got there. Mayo. Super douche and cranberry hoe speed off after a few more rocks and a half a swing at the owner, which resulted in a full power pull cue to the wrist. We eventually really did call the dude an Uber, paid for the chick's drinks for him. He insisted he paid for his and the Uber, so we let him. Police were upset that we let the victim go before they could get a report and asked to watch our videotapes, which we only have inside unfortunately. I don't know what happened after that as I quit shortly after for a better position faking craziest day at work though. Anti-help story of bar staff and bouncers. Ex was roofied at big nightclub. Random guy was asking her if she wants to go and wanted to drag her with him. She pulled away at first and felt she is starting to lose conscious and ability to walk. Tried to get help from bar and asked them to call for the ambulance because she felt very strange. They said if she doesn't leave immediately they will throw her out. I think she looked and sounded drunk to them. She had bought a drink, went dancing with girlfriend, came back, couple of sips, dancing and then felt she is going to pass out soon. Tiny girl. Couldn't find her friend also. She called me. I was in town that night about 15-minute walk away. Just sat in the table with friends and ordered my first beer. First, I was surprised for the call. We hadn't communicated about a year. She was talking so strangely, and I had known her for 5 years. It felt very off. She said a guy's trying to grab her. I felt such a rush of blood when she talked to me and asked for me to come. I knew what was up. Lately in media there were lots of articles of guys drugging girls at nightclubs. My male friend was also roofied a month ago. Told her to go to women toilet and lock herself in. Kept her on phone until she managed to do it. Told to stay there and only open to my voice. Told my friends I need to leave immediately and left. Wanted to get a quick taxi but impossible on Friday night. So I just ran. There in 5 to 6 minutes full speed because I knew it might be matter of minutes. I had to buy a ticket for nightclub because they didn't believe someone is in trouble. I didn't want to argue, so yeah, bought ticket and rushed to women's toilets. There was bouncer near, so he looked me very strangely when I started to go in and wanted to stop me. I explained my girlfriend feels sick and I need to get her home. He was keeping an eye for me. X opened up and I didn't care for looks and comments of girls there. Took her and looked at her and started to walk out. Slowly, bouncer came to me and said we need to leave or they will throw us out. Same thing happened with another bouncer when we were almost out. FFSASHEUR and EUR #ANYWAY. I managed to walk/carry her out. She didn't want me to call ambulance, though I asked every couple of minutes because she was throwing up every now and then and was very limp. So taxi was out of question. So I carried her home over my shoulder for almost an hour and stayed till morning sitting in chair next to her because I thought she might suffocate or SMTH if she starts throwing up. She woke and didn't remember half of the things, but remembers creepy dude, and she called me. Told it a week later to my current girlfriend because she found out I had left my friends. Although she is a uber jealous girl sometimes, she said I did the right thing and never questioned me. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for my first Reddit gold ever. That came unexpectedly and I'm glad the post received it was meaningful one. Not one of random comments I've written. I have few friends at a bar I visit. Bartender, female, and a bouncer, male. I'm pretty good friends with the bartender as we live really close to each other. Anyways, I was hanging out in the bar talking to the bartender and the bouncer when this really drunken woman came to sit by my side. She started saying that I looked lonely and her group of friends noticed me and she came to ask if I wanted to sit at their table. I politely declined, saying that I'm fine and don't really feel like socializing with random people. She proceeds to tell me that one of the women in the group wanted me in her bed that evening. Again I politely said no and the woman seemed to understand and went back to their table. After a while the woman who wanted to sleep with me came over, again really drunk, and started to ask me inappropriate questions like how big are you? And I will fuck your brains out tonight. Then she started to grope me, slapping my ass and trying to get me to feel her breasts and stuff. At this point my bartender friend came over and asked if I would go on a break with her, and noticed the woman. My friend put her arm around me and straight up kissed me and called me babe and stared at the woman really intensely. At that point the bouncer noticed what was happening, as he knows that the bartender has a boyfriend and it's not me, and pushed himself between me and the harassing woman. This annoyed the woman and she tried to punch the bouncer, who in turn did some sort of Chuck Norris-esque move and flipped the woman around and basically carried her by the neck and pants outside. It looked so glorious and the group quickly left. Later found out that the group was a bachelorette party for the woman who wanted to sleep with me, so I dodged a whole lot of drama. It pays to have friends in bars. Yes, and she was a friend, which was super awkward. Him, software engineer at IBM. Clearly a nice, but rather a tiring guy, mid-30s, didn't go on a lot of dates by choice. Very soft-spoken, low-key, just looking for a nice dinner after work sort of thing. Recently Aish, 6 months prior, got out of a long-term, rather ugly open relationship in which they were both toxic and abusive to each other. She'd been going to therapy and was looking to start over, i.e. date a new type of guy in a new type of way. She was a friend from high school, so I invited her to come by our place, since it was a suburban wine bar and restaurant mostly frequented by retirees and couples with kids. Very much not the sort of hard drinking, hard charging place she used to do. The date, I was busy and not watching, but it apparently went down in flames from the get-go. Her first 4 topics of conversation were 1. how she hated her ex. 2. How she liked rough sex. 3. How she hated religion. 4. How his very boring dress was a change. She then started in very aggressively on how much she likes Krav Maga and how no man will ever resist her. Again. At this point, he was done and feeling mildly threatened and went to the bathroom, then came to the bar and ordered a safety drink. Like I said, she was a friend, so I was fairly surprised, but safety drinks are something you have to treat with utmost seriousness, so I ordered him an Uber and 2 minutes later he was gone. I then had to go break the news to her. I thought she would be fine, because friends and all, but she flipped. Like literally, flipped the table and chairs, started throwing shit, and had a total Kyle meltdown, all while screaming about all the ways she had been planning to finally get laid. She's about 5 feet 8, 140, and I'm 6 feet 1, 225, and have had a few years of training myself, so if it came to a fight I wasn't afraid, but I also wasn't paid nearly enough to fight someone with 8 years of Krav Maga at work, so I just watched and tried to talk her down. The police were called, and she was ultimately tased and arrested. Guns were drawn. It was really ugly. Semi-happy ending though. Turns out, she had just started varenicline along with the SSRI antidepressant she was already on, and that can have a rare but known adverse reaction that causes very violent behavior. So she ultimately wasn't charged, apologized profusely, paid for everything, and even sent the guy a really nice note. They didn't date again or anything, but it was at least nice to see that I hadn't grossly misjudged her as a person in the long run. Also, mad props to him for situational awareness. Like, damn, he read things well. I used to own a bar and we were the only cocktail lounge situated in between a bunch of nightclub style places. They were loud, and we were lively but not deafening. We would have quite a bit of overflow with hammered guests from these clubs, and it was a pretty weekly occurrence for us to have some sort of nonsense spill over into my bar. Granted, no one asked for the code word or angel shot. I just happened to notice something strange. In the middle of our 1 AM rush I see this guy pull a chair from the table and set it at the entrance to a hallway where our restrooms are. I grabbed a female bartender and asked her to check on the female bathroom and see if there was a girl in there with anything weird going on while I went and checked on the guy. I ask the guy how he is doing and if I can get him anything, and he tells me to fuck off and he is just waiting for someone. I step away and my bartender informs me there is a girl in there crying and hiding from this guy who was following her from bar to bar, and she stepped into ours to hide. I have her go get the girl while me and another bartender inform the guy he can't have his chair there because of fire code and he has to move. He resists, so we assertively walk him out of our bar while the girl is walked out our kitchen door out back where my staff parks, and my female bartender gave her a ride to her car. In a busy rush we never saw a girl just going to the bathroom, so sometimes in these situations you have to watch for the other signs, which could be anything. It was just a weird guy moving a chair that time. Not a bartender, but a bouncer still am. It fucking disgusts me when these scenarios do happen. They are so damn common, at least the place I work at. I work at a nightclub on the weekends in California. It's on the high class end. It's probably the worst crowd combo you can mix together. Rich people in suites and gangsters with all the drug money / drugs you can imagine. Anyways, fast forward to what happened last weekend. Had a group of girls, maybe 5 to 6, go to a VIP table with a group of guys. I remember talking to one saying it was her first night at a club for her 21st birthday. Before they went inside, none of groups knew each other. Different parties. Fast forward another 2 hours later into the night, I see the same group of guys from the VIP table in a corner next to the pillar. Kinda formed a circle position, like they were doing a line of coke, but it was pretty obvious that they were doing some shady shit. 2 of the 5 to 6 girls that were inside the circle, one was passed out / being groped, while the other one girl had her panties off. Didn't see this till later from the guy that was with her, while the another guy from the same party had his hand on her mouth. I made eye contact with her to see if she was okay. Her eyes blared out, me basically crying for help. I pretty much knew what was going on at this point. I grabbed the guy by the neck and pinned him against the wall saying, "You're faking done." All of his boys in the circle jump on me, then the rest of the staff comes and kicks the whole party out. One of the females from the party wrote down on a piece of napkin, "Please walk us to Uber." I'm not sure why they weren't verbal with it. I think they just didn't want to get embarrassed, or English was bad. 15 to 20 minutes later I waited till their Uber came, and the one that wrote me the note on the napkin gave me a really aggressive huge slash, crying at the same time saying thank you. She was stuttering really bad. Poor girl, she was probably terrified as fuck. I felt really bad for her. Imagine almost being wrapped for your 21st birthday present. People faking suck ass. The sad part is these people have so much money, most likely bribed the police officers. No police report, nothing filed, no arrest, no dog sheet, anything happening to these facts. Yet they are probably going to do the same thing at a different club next weekend. Not an angel shot, but I was in a lingerie, adult store one time looking for a corset for a costume piece for something. The store is clean, bright, and very welcoming, not at all the seedy kind of place a lot of people picture when they think of adult stores. I got there, and the store was empty except for the staff and one other customer who was checking out when I came in. After browsing for a little bit, a guy who I guess had come in after me comes up to me and tries to start a conversation. Being a generally nice and sociable person, I chat with him a little bit about the corsets I was looking at, and we introduce ourselves. So far it was a little awkward, but it just seemed like he wanted to chat, and I'm not a totally rude person, so whatever. Then he started asking me about toys and telling me about the toys he just bought. This immediately set off alarms in my head, so I tried to walk away in order to diffuse the situation organically, but he kept following me and asking me questions. Eventually, I grabbed a random corset, walked over to one of the staff members quickly enough to put some space between us, and loudly asked him if they had it in any other sizes, and then whispered, "This guy won't leave me alone, please help." The staff member asked me if I wanted to try the corset on, and took me to a dressing room with a locking door. I went in, and after a few minutes I called the store from my cell. The other staff member who was working, who was the back for the first half of this ordeal, picked up, and I asked her if the guy was gone yet. She said no, he was still waiting for me, and apologized profusely. Apparently this guy follows girls around the store and then asks them to go have sex in his car. He's banned from the store, but she didn't realize he was there, and the other staffer was new and unaware. I wound up being stuck in the changing room for another 10 minutes until they said the guy left. I came back out and chatted with the staff for a few minutes because the guy was still sitting in his car in the parking lot. Apparently the creeper had gone up to the very clearly openly gay, as he was wearing pride attire, male staffer while I was in the changing room, and asked him if he thought I was cute. After a while, the male staff member finally said the guy had left, and I gave it 2 or 3 minutes before I started to walk outside. In that time, however, apparently the creeper had come back and was now parked directly in front of the building, probably waiting for me to come out. He sat there for another 10 minutes before he finally drove away. I did make sure I got a good look at his car before he left, so I could be aware if he was following me home. The female staff member tried to call the store owner, but he was too far away to do anything. If the guy had stayed any longer, we were going to call the police. I'm still annoyed that I didn't wind up calling the police when we realized he was waiting for me outside, but there's nothing that can really be done at this point. But yeah, that's the closest I've come to having an experience like that. There's one person that comes to mind that I wish I had done more to help, but she refused. I was waiting tables, late night shift in Boston. She was young, attractive, and some sort of Eastern European. She was with a youngish Middle Eastern man. He was heavier and very bearded, certainly not as attractive as she was. I had to check their IDs, and he gave me a Saudi ID that I couldn't read save for a dob, and she gave me an ID that was local, but based on her accent I doubt was hers. She looked so familiar to me too, I just couldn't place how I know her. They ordered drinks, She barely touches hers. They sit for 20 minutes while he finishes his martini and then downs hers before dropping a $100 bill on the table, and they get up to leave. She looks very nervous and uncomfortable. He goes to use the restroom and I see my opportunity to offer her a way out. "Are you okay? I can get you a cab out the back entrance right now if you want. We can go now." "No, thank you. I'm okay." She looks like she's about to cry, and I desperately wanted to grab her by the arm and pull her into the back and get her out of there, but I didn't want to overstep. They disappear upstairs. This is a hotel with bars/restaurants on the first floor. The following week, at my day job, I was at the nearby food court getting lunch. There was a really good Greek place. I'm paying for my food, and I look at the cashier, and my heart skips. It's the girl from that night. We make eye contact, and I don't think she recognized me, but I certainly remembered her. I didn't say anything. Maybe I should have. I hope she's doing okay, and that she's in a better situation now. TLDR, lot of backstory on a person first, then story of a decent guy trying to not be pounced. I ran security, fancy way of saying head bouncer, at a bar/small music venue in Houston, TX. And this is a bit of an odd story. We had a regular who was a bit disabled. I won't go into detail because then anyone who knew the area may know her, but she also was always on something and always drank too much too fast. She would occasionally get very heavy-handed with her flirting to different men, women, and couples, and then get very offended when they rebuffed her advances. By offended, I mean loud and obnoxious, claiming it was just her disabilities that they were turning her down. She was attractive at that time. She was in the early stages of her addictions and so still pretty. She never wore a bra and often wore tight shirts and was perky and all. She wore shirt skirts, no panties, or shorts with loose thighs and no panties, and by the end of every night, most of everyone in the place knew that she was pantyless. There was an incident where she pulled her tampon out and flung it at a bouncer at another bar too. Now, she liked me a lot and often tried to hit on me and so forth, but my then GFs were always around and they scared her. One was 6 feet tall and an amazing Amazon. And the other, they were dating as well, was great at running interference and diffusing situations. But since she liked me, she would normally do what I asked her to. As for why she was allowed in, the owner and manager both felt very sorry for her and had known her since before her disabilities. So she was always allowed in for free. The bartenders often felt sorry for her and gave her stronger drinks or free drinks etc. Which made matters worse. Now, as she was attractive and a sure thing, she never went home alone or wherever they took her. And there were actually a few decent-ish regulars who would take her home for fun and giggles. This may seem not decent, but we would rather her go home with someone who would use protection and not hurt her and make sure she got home safely than some stranger or have her stumble home through the streets of Houston at night. And as for someone just giving her a ride home to see her home safely, she would just leave and go to any other bar or place looking for someone for such. She would do this to not be lonely or to feel better etc. Okay, now on to the story that is pertinent. We were busy-ish and had a decent local band. This place was a neighborhood bar for most of the day and week, but Thursday through Saturday we were a popular local music venue. If the regulars were in, when it went from just a bar to music venue, around 7 or 8 depending, they did not have to pay cover and got to stay. A common thing in our area, they hung out at a part of the bar you could not see the stage well, or on the patio, so the acts did not care. So on those days, we had lots of non-locals, often college kids and the like from all over the area. We had everyone from Kid Rock, in his heyday, to Slash's Snakebit, to Evanescence, to local Texas bands and smaller touring groups that were popular with college kids. And there was a group of college guys that came in, and they were all wearing shorts and t-shirts. This is Texas in the summer, and just relaxed. All but one were drinking. He was the designated driver, so he drank soda/bottled water for free, and got free food. And he was also really into the band that was playing that night. So he was dancing a bit, swaying and moving to the music. I was keeping my eye on the group of guys he was with because College boys out drinking and partying. Enter in Ms. X. She took a huge liking to the DD and started trying to dance with him. She even grabbed his hands and put them on her breasts over her shirt at one point and flashed him and his friends her down below area. His friends were pushing him into accepting her advances and the guy was obviously uncomfortable. He tried to sit down, but she tried to sit on his lap. So he stayed standing. He tried to go to the bathroom, but she followed him, so he stayed at his table. One of the waitresses went over and tried to run some interference for the man. Then came by me to ask me to keep an eye on him. He seemed very naive and nervous and his friends were really pushing him to let Ms. X do whatever she wanted with him. I went over and asked how everyone was doing to give him a chance. He said nothing. But seeing his DD wristband, our bar gave those out so they could get their free stuff. I told him if he needed anything he could even ask security for it. Well, she was getting rather handsy a little while later and he came up to me with her tagging along. We had posted on the door that went to the bathrooms a sign that said, if you are being bothered, to just ask for a strong virgin alcoholic drink, to alert the staff. Where I typically stood is on a small platform between the door to the bathroom and the sound box, what we called where the sound and light boards were at. The platform for that was what I stood on to see over the crowd. He then asked if I could get him a super strong virgin Jack and Coke. I nodded and told him to come with me to the bar. I signaled the waitress and had her run interference with Ms. X while I got him to the bar. He said he could not leave his friends because he was the DD. So I said I would take care of it. I told him to go along with what I was about to do. I grabbed his arm and drug him back to their table and told them they all had to leave. That he had tried to get a real drink and since DDs got stuff for free but could not get booze, he was scamming us and since he was their DD, they all had to leave. Now, I and another bouncer escorted them outside and to their car. He looked so relieved. The friends were laughing at him growing balls and trying to drink a real drink, but took the eviction well enough. He came back a few days later and thanked us for getting him out of the situation. He really did not drink, he was engaged. Neither of them were real party people, but their friends were. Hi friends did not like that he was getting married and kept trying to get him to screw around. He was a decent guy. As a female bartender, I can vouch that things behind the bar can get a little uncomfortable as well. We had signs for a safe drink posted in the women's washroom, albeit we should have had them in the men's room too, but for staff the code word was anything to do with Shirley Temples, as we didn't have any. If we said this to another co-worker, manager, or security, they would give us an escape from the conversation and get another bartender, server, or security to the patron. That was making us uncomfortable depending on severity. I'd never got the customer order, but staff use the Shirley Temple method more than infrequently. Myself, I had just finished my shift and an older patron started chatting me up. At first it was friendly, if not a little flirty, but then it got very sexually explicit. Talking about my clothing, bartenders being hosts, etc. This had only been about 10 minutes since my shift ended. Before I could tell him to screw off, my stellar bartender said, "I left that Shirley Temple for you in the staff room." I smiled, nodded, and headed to the back. When I was gone, the bartender told the gentleman we don't speak to any patrons or staff that way, and he got aggressive, so they kicked him out. Coworker, a coworker of mine was being held up at a table, and out of the corner of my eye I saw these guys grabbing her apron, and one of them ran his hand along her thigh. Startled, she stepped back, knocked another server with a drink tray over, and the customer had still grabbed her wrist and tried to pull her into his lap. This is about the time I made it through the bar to her table, and she just smirked at me and said I forgot the Shirley Temple for table 6. I nodded and told her to go take care of it. A blissfully easy reprieve. To which we alert security to keep an eye on those guys. Whenever we Shirley a table, they get cut off for at least a half hour. For both females and males working the establishment, it's been a grateful reprieve from overly uncomfortable tables. Edit. Can't read and just saw the post specified men. I had a crew of girls sitting on a security guard. He looked uncomfortable, and I asked if he wanted a drink, and he asked me if I could grab him a Shirley Temple. I said no problem, I'll watch the door while he goes to get a drink. He switched with the bouncer outside for an hour break. Not a bar staff, but relevant I guess. I used to be a taxi driver in a semi-rural area. It was so country that phone calls came to the cars for drivers to answer via two-way radios. We like to look after all locals, and on a Friday and Saturday night, a good portion of our calls were waste of time because we would show up to find nobody there or just randoms getting in. Sometimes we later found out the original caller saw randoms getting in, decided to walk home, only to nearly run into trouble point. So we identified the regulars that called in busy times. It was one thing for Dave the regular to ring up to get a taxi home from work, but any drunk random could get in and say Dave, and some drivers would be on a thuizer. So for any bookings for workers we instructed them to say staff. That way Dave, who was knocking off at Macca's, or Sarah, who was finishing off her shift at a pizza place, got their taxi point. We also had the young party goers in town and identified who was willing to wait if they called us and who was calling us, then immediately calling other companies to see who would arrive quicker. A build-up of trust meant they knew they would be picked up and taken home safely. We gave them code words too. Our company was cash only at the time, so their code word or words were "I've only got card, I'll need to stop and get some cash out," and our unofficial policy was to stop the meter while we drove to an ATM. But we knew the people we were picking up also had faith in us to get them home point. There was also a few girls who religiously went out every Saturday into the bigger town 20 minutes away. They often complained that we could drive them there easy. It was nearly impossible to get a taxi back from the rival company. We instructed them that if they moved away from the usual areas, outside nightclubs, anywhere with crowds, they could use a code order along with pickup address, and we would definitely go pick them up. Even if it meant we parked near somewhere they were hiding from people point, they would rush in, thank me, and off we went. Sometimes they shouted me Macca's at the end of the day. I wanted to earn money, but I also wanted to make sure the local folk felt protected and looked after. So down here in the venue I worked in Sydney, they have Angela. It's much more like a person than shots or drinks. So if anyone got a bad date or got harassed, they could come up to bar and ask, "Hey, is Angela in tonight? I would like to meet her," or some sort of similar line. Some important details. It is Monday and most of venues run slow in Sydney. I worked in a tequila bar where there is only a single bartender on Monday and a manager. It is evening time around 7:30 p.m. in winter. So a guy and a girl came into our bar and asked for 2 gin and tonic. I happily served them, and they took a seat in front of me something like 10 meters away close to the window. Some minutes pass, I notice things. He was slipping his hands down the skirt, tried to kiss her forcibly or fondle her breasts. It was pretty much as if the guy was thinking she was a sex toy or something similar. Me being extremely unbearable to that abuse I saw going in front of me, I brought water to their table and then whispered to the girl to go to bathroom. I had zero idea if they were couple or just a date at that point. I told her so to determine if they were on a date. The guy told me to fuck off cause I was being so close to his date. I'm a 5'5" guy who weighed 54 kilos at that time, and the guy was around 6 feet tall with body that could put an uncontrollable bull down. So I just said I was just getting them water. So we have this Angela posters all over female toilets and in the venue. She excused herself after a minute of me returning to my bar. She came out of toilet after a minute and then came to bar and straight asked me if I could call police cause he had been too physical and it was their first date. I straight away radioed my manager of the situation, and in 3 minutes the cops came in. We had video evidence of what had been going on. Mind you, in NSW every venue serving alcohol requires to have certain amount of CCTV depending on the size. Now, those 3 minutes of my life was a very extreme one. The guy came rushing to the bar and then grabbed me by my collar saying I was flirting with his date. I was blank, and after some seconds said I was just asking what shots she was gonna have with you and was providing suggestions to what they could have. Never in my bartending career had anyone put hands on me. I was extremely surprised, angry and scared. I immediately radioed my manager 3 stars, slip 3 stars being the code word for when someone gets physical and slip being the main bar. My manager a floor above me reached the main bar in mere seconds, which felt like a long time to me. He straight away came to the bar and asked who it was. Keep in mind that my manager is a handsome British guy who is 6'4", goes to gym every day and squats 150 kilograms. I pointed to the guy and engaged on a verbal discussion. Seconds later the guy punches my manager and a fight breaks out. Not long after that around 6 cops come in and break the fight and cuffs my manager and the guy. I immediately notify the police that my manager was the one who called them as the guy was abusing the girl. The girl also begs the police to let my manager go and confirms my story. So my manager tells that he can show the CCTV footage and they can decide what happens next. My manager and 2 cops walk into the office, come back 5 minutes later, and then puts the guy in their second car. The police apologizes for the misunderstanding and then ask me and the girl if we could testify honestly if things went crazy. We promised to testify the truth and they went to their business with the guy in cuffs. My manager apologizes to the girl and the girl started to cry cause she was extremely scared. My manager kept her there and gave her water. She kept sobbing for like 30 minutes. We offered to call her Uber, but she kept crying. After an hour she stops sobbing and then thanks us for what we did. We provided her some foods from our kitchen and then called Uber for her when she stopped crying so she could go home. Weeks later she comes by and thanks us for what we had done. I never felt so proud and happy when she thanked us. Me and our manager both got a pay raise and everyone in our hospitality company knew what we had done. We were basically showered with compliments and praises. Fast forward 3 months, I left that job because I got an extremely good offer at a Hathead restaurant, but from what I came to know, the girl and my manager were dating. They recently celebrated their first year of being together and went to Italy for a holiday. Not safe word, but wordless calling for help point. When I was collecting empty glasses from tables I saw a woman sitting inside of sofa, as far away from guy as possible who really wanted to be very close to her, and was holding hand on her lap. When woman realized I watched situation from away she sent me this look of scared rabbit. So I've got man's attention and asked him to come with me to bar cause we found out there was error in card transaction and it wasn't finalized. He said it's not problem. I walked with him to bar after a minute or 2 of digging through card payment confirmations, asking him several times of what he bought, how much it costed. I found his receipt, told him it was mistake cause everything is okay, apologized and guy just left to come back to his friend. Few seconds later I heard some ruckus. So I came to look if it's this annoying guy. It was him. He was asking some random guy, where is that woman with who he was sitting earlier? Everyone sweared that they didn't know. Yeah, everyone have to see them and definitely saw her sneaking out through back door when he left with me. It was starting to be dangerous so I asked man to leave. After some swearing, this time to me, I treated him for calling police. It didn't work too well. So I had to throw guy out of pub. If you know how to properly bend someone's arm and have strong grip you'll lead almost anyone outside pub. This evening I earned the biggest tip ever from people who saw whole situation. Woman came back next day to thank me. I wasn't at shift, but we met later many times because she became regular. Guy never came back. I'm not a bar employee, but I have an experience like this. My friends and I were in New Orleans for a bachelor party. There were 16 of us all from Canada and we were at a piano bar. 2 AM rolls around and we are leaving the bar when I see a girl from a bachelorette party that we had been hanging out with. She was wide-eyed and looked scared. So I walked over and put my arms around her in a big hug point. She was surrounded by 3 guys and they were obviously pissed. I interrupted them. I started talking to the guys as a way of stalling them until my buddies could make it outside. Just as they were starting to get aggressive with me, all my buddies start making their way outside and coming to my rescue. Lol. Point now, I'm not a small guy, but there is no way I'd have had a chance against these guys. I got lucky though, because the first 2 guys to show up were my younger brother and his friend. Both of them are 6 feet 4 inches and over 300 pounds. I could almost feel it when they walked up behind me. I'm so lucky they were there. Needless to say, the 3 guys left without incident. I ended up walking the girls back to their hotel and we partied. together again the next night. I often wish I had kept in touch with those ladies. We had a lot of fun those 2 nights. They were a riot to be around, and even though it was a scary incident, it's one of my favorite memories from the trip. Edit. I just remembered something unrelated. We were having swimming races in the hotel pool. I raced against a girl who was also having a bachelorette party. She accidentally punched me in the face as we were swimming. Laugh out loud. Her engagement ring cut my face open. That was a tough injury to explain when I got home. I worked in a large nightclub as an AvTech, but was also a duty manager, and thus, required to be a badged doorman, UK word for a regulated bouncer. Basically, the place was a grid of rooms with doors in every possible place, but only done open to public use. With a security card, you could unlock any door in under a second, and this how we responded to fights and such quickly. We had no safe word, but we did have a very strong policy that, if you told us you were in trouble, we would move you quickly to a staff only area, and talk to you about what you needed. We'd walk them very quickly away from everyone, and through a security door, where other security would meet us. Imagine a fairly chubby version of the scene from Taken where the singer is taken quickly to a car, except we'd take them quickly to a staff only area, with a lot less pizzazz. We'd just open one of the many doors in the walls and suddenly be somewhere out. Was much slower to get to for anyone else. We had several guys ask for our help. None stand out, mostly just dudes who had fallen out with friends or those they were out with and thought leaving with them might be dangerous. Usually, we let them get a taxi on account. Sometimes we watched their friends and found we wanted rid of them instead and would let the other guy back in. Sadly, we were asked much more often by women, and although the guys were avoiding potentially serious harm, the women were usually avoiding a sinister predatory and sexual threat. No more real, but very seedy. On one occasion I took a woman out at her request, only for her to tell me in the office that she wanted to leave because a guy who had rapped her the year before was in the club. She left in a friend's car. He left under supervision of security. I know it might not have been true, but no one was happy to risk it being true and maybe happening again. I have never heard of a safeword drink before today, but I really wish they had something like this back in the 90s when I was a skinny little pretty boy goth punk kid. I remember being around 21 or so and going to a local club that was hosting bondage show, which was basically a sort stage show with sexy men and women in different bondage gear being lightly spanked and whipped while industrial and techno music played. Here I was having a pretty good time when some woman who was at least 10 years older than me decided that she wanted in on the action. First she pulled me towards her and then started licking my face and neck. The whole time she was also groping me and grabbing my crotch. I was freaking out pretty good, but everyone around me was just laughing and thought it was the coolest thing ever. Even the bartenders and bouncers who were less than 10 feet away either ignored it or just stood there staring. Eventually she jammed her hands down my pants, fell over in a drunken stupor, and pulled me on top of her. I must have had a look of sheer terror and sadness on my face, because I was almost in tears and looked for anyone to help me. Some older gay dude I knew from the local punk scene saw what happened from across the bar and came and helped me out. He walked me outside, and I was trying so goddamn hard not to cry. I mean, what sort of 20-year-old guy wouldn't like some slightly hot older woman grabbing at them, right? But during the entire situation I was terrified beyond belief. Point being, in the sort of scene I was in back then, and looking and dressing the way I did, me and my friends had a lot of similar things happen. At the time there was a real you should be happy women are grabbing you attitude, so it was really hard to come to an idea of how I should have felt about it. Hindsight being 20/20, I realized there were plenty of times I was outright sexually assaulted by both men and women, but at the time I just figured that it was just the way things were, and if I didn't like it, I could just sit in my room playing Nintendo like everyone else my age. I have a question here. Is there any chance a new bartender might not be familiar with the safe word? I'm sure it's part of training, but I remember from being a server that so many things were thrown at me in my first 2 days before I was cut loose on my own that I forgot a few much more inconsequential things. Or, what if a first time patron is accosted on the way to his bar before he has a chance to get to the bathroom or wherever the code drink name is posted. Is there no benefit to straightforward plea for help? The reason I ask is a result of the active shooter training I did with the local police department. On the campuses where I work, I'm a teacher. The code for going on lockdown is a PA announcement: we are on lockdown. Straightforward. Lock the doors. Cover the windows. Get down against the wall. Stay silent. The school I attended, to the contrary, would have a PA announcement: Mr. now deceased long retired first headmaster of the school, please come to the office. Code, but the same procedure. I asked about this strategy, and the officer with whom we were talking raised the point that if there's a sub in the building, if the teacher doesn't hear the PA announcement or doesn't register the specific name, that is, tunes out when it's not their name, the code fails. An intruder hearing that the school is on lockdown doesn't change his behavior because they are aware that they have only minutes to start spraying bullets. I've worked as a bartender and a bouncer, mostly bartending though. Never heard of this safety drink before, but I've worked in a more rural area. But since it's a rural area, the cops often use between 30 to 60 minutes to come when called, and the guests know this, so sometimes shit really hits the fan. Our old bouncers were from a local company. They were lazy and more interested in talking to each other than actually doing shit, so I often had to step between shit that happened myself. One time around closing, we were cleaning the bar while the bouncers were cleaning outside and locking the doors. One of our bouncers was a short and fat woman, approximate around 1.60 cms high. I saw her struggling to close the door as two giant hands had grabbed onto the edge from the outside and started to pry it open. She didn't need to say anything as it was pretty clear that the huge man on the other side of the door was way too much for her to handle. I ran around the bar and saw him force open the door. Luckily the distance from the bar to the door is about 5 meters so before he managed to get a hold of our short but wide bouncer. I was able to double leg him, but he drags me with him down. I land on my stomach next to him as he is on his back, and as I roll away he plants his huge fist into the wooden boards where my head had been. This is when the other more useful bouncers appear and pile on top of him, and we got him handcuffed and call the cops. We had to wait 40 minutes for them to arrive, but at least we got 1 hour of overtime pay for the wait. I used to manage a local hole-in-the-wall bar. I'm aware of the Ask for Angela and Angel shot, but we had another one. If you ordered a Bud Light with 2 limes it meant help. One time a regular came in with someone I'd never met, and he didn't introduce us, so I thought it was weird. They order a round of drinks and go outside for a cigarette. I do my rounds in the bar and make my way outside and ask if they're okay. Regular says he wants Bud Light with 2 limes. The other guy seems to be oblivious and says he wants one too. I told him I have to close him out on his tab since he walked out last time, and he agrees. I go inside, tell my bartender what's happening and that I'm letting him go for the 1 drink he had so I can get him out. I go outside and tell him the card didn't go through and the other guy offers to pay. The only thing I could think to say was, buddy, if you wanna pay that tab he walked out on, you better have a good line of credit. With that I brought him to the back and told him I'll call him an Uber. He said he already did, but he wanted to hang back with me until it came. Turns out the guy was some rando he met 2 bars ago, but couldn't find a way to politely shake him. The guy was telling him he's off his meds and just got off of psych hold, and my regular told him he had to go several times, but finally said he's meeting friends at my bar. It ends with the regular walking out and the weirdo trying to hop in the Uber. I told him he needed to tab out for his first round and the Uber left while he paid. I was a door guy at a bar, which had weekend shows with heavier type music. I'm not a huge guy. I'm 5 minutes and 10 seconds, about 180 lbs. This guy walks up to me, and he says he just got hit in the face. This guy's like 6 feet 5 inches. He's sniffling and looks to be about to cry. My immediate thought was, Jesus Christ dude, what the fuck you want me to do? Anyway I said, okay, where is he? He sniffles hard and points toward the mosh area and says she's over there. I jump up and I'm on the lookout for her. I see the other door guy who worked the back door trying to wrestle this chick. There was No appropriate way for me to grab her until she latched both arms onto the other door guy's arm and proceeded to try to bite a huge chunk out of his arm. At this point I was able to put her in a full Nelson and reeled her back. She began kicking everyone in front of us, legs flailing. The other door guy was retreating at this point. Luckily a couple other male patrons were able to grab her legs and we escorted her out the back door. The bar side of the venue is usually a little calmer, so everyone there seen the commotion and cops were called. We escorted her rather harshly through the back door, where she proceeded to get in a 3-point stance like a linebacker and rushed toward the heavy metal back door. I slammed the door right as she was about to make contact. She hit the door hard and probably gave herself a concussion. Less than a minute and the cops were there arresting her. She was the girlfriend of the half-naked lead singer, who never even skipped a beat. He was used to it and probably got to take another chick home that night. Used to tend bar and manage at a cocktail bar / restaurant in my early 20s. We didn't have any safe word drinks, but we were trained on identifying sexual assault signals and warning signs. To be completely honest and candid about my experience, the only time I saw or had to react to explicit sexual harassment and sexual assault in one case was towards my female staff. Some customers were incredibly gross and crossed boundaries constantly. Had to kick an older gentleman out for groping one of my restaurant's waitresses. It was disgusting, and the rest of the group that came with our perpetrator had such a shitty attitude for the next 20 minutes, and we had to ask them to leave as well. Point a customer story that just felt wrong. We had this very attractive woman in her mid to late 30s come in regularly for about a month. She never had a man with her. I never saw a ring, but she would always FaceTime at the bar. I was always very curious, but would never ask, because it's none of my business. Customers are not shy about sharing, so if you have to pry, they probably don't want to talk about it. The last night I ever saw her there is when things got weird. I had no idea what she did for a living, but we were connected to a very nice hotel, so I assumed she travels quite a bit for work. Point she's there, and this time she's not FaceTiming. She's being very flirty with myself and another bartender, explicitly implying she wants to have sex lol. Then out of nowhere this weird older gentleman, late 40s, comes and sits next to her. They weren't yelling, but he was essentially in her face, and you could tell it was intense. After about 10 minutes of this, I step in. Is there something wrong? You haven't ordered anything. Can I help you? Excuse me. Mind your own business, bud. Well, you probably don't know this, but I'm actually the manager here, and if you're not ordering anything and you're harassing my customers, I'm going to ask you to leave. He looks at me, grunts and leaves out the front door. The lady says thank you, but then she gets up and goes outside to him, and they get in this beat up car and I never see her again. I honestly think she may have been an escort. I don't know. I had sirens going off in my head. Big time. She even thanks me, and then she leaves. I've thought about this scenario often. Haven't seen her since. Side note, being so young, customers assumed they could treat me however they pleased. Naturally I enjoyed pulling the I'm actually the manager here, you can leave card. Mayo. Edit. Grammar. Here's a story from the other side of the bar. When I was 19, legal drinking age here in Ontario, I met a few friends at our university pub for pub night. Well, pub night makes it sound like a quiet evening of people in booths having a few beers. Well, it wasn't. We are talking full on nightclub atmosphere. Anyway, I go to the bar to order a few drinks for everyone. Took a couple of the friends with me to carry all the drinks back. Anyway, I order a rum and coke as I really didn't like the taste of beer back then. The girls order a variety of drinks. Everything from beer to a daiquiri. Anyway, back at the group I hand everyone their drinks and grab one of the girls to go dance. Come back and there was this new guy hanging around making comments about how attractive my date is. I respond with she's just a friend. So being friendly, it's the first week Akafrosh week. I invite him to join us. After all, none of us really know each other. New guy accidentally knocked my drink over and says he's really sorry and goes to get me a new one. I remember half of that drink. I remember going to the washroom, being dragged out by the bouncers, put in a cab and taken to where I lived. They deposited me in the basement apartment, and I woke up the next morning about $250 poorer and incredibly cold. Like I couldn't get warm if I tried. Fast forward about 3 hours, and I'm talking to my landlady. She, being a nurse, immediately says, "It sounds like you were drugged." I never took it very seriously, but spent the better part of that weekend in bed. Talked to my friend G, who was with us that night. G, who was that guy on Friday night. He was really creepy. He kept buying C, the same girl new guy thought was hot, drinks like non-stop rum and cokes. Me, no idea, just met him earlier that evening. Me, wait, she drinks beer. G, yeah, she didn't drink them, but threw them into the planter. Me, wait a second, sorry for the poor formatting on my iPhone. Not a bartender, but I was kind of a supervisor at the grocery store I worked at. I oversaw the daily cashiers and told them when to go on break and whatnot. Did this while in high school and college and even after for a bit. By the time I was 27, half the cashiers were younger than me, but I got along with them pretty well. One of cashiers was a senior or junior in high school. A good looking guy who always had the girls fawning over him. He was dating this girl who was very clicky. At first it was kind of cute. His mother worked with me, and she told me stories of how controlling she really was. Over time, it became clear that she was poison. She would come in and literally sit on the benches inside the store for his whole shift. At first we would tease him, but eventually it got really annoying. She would pester him while he was working, and I would occasionally have to ask her to leave nicely. This is retail after all. She would start yelling at him at work if she even thought he was talking to another girl. It got awkward all the time. No one could understand why he was dating her, but hey, that's young love. Anyway, over time this did break down and they broke up, and then it got even more toxic. She would come in when he was working and just stare at him for hours. She would come in on his days off and ask for his schedule. Never gave it to her. Finally, one day, she comes in and freaks out on him. We made her leave, but she was circling the parking lot in her car. When his shift was over, management had me escort him to his car. Sure as shit, she found us in the lot and started slowly following us. I'm not a huge guy or anything, so I pretty much assumed she was going to run me over once. She was done butchering him. When we got to his car, he kind of laughed it off. I stayed with him a minute until she finally drove off. She was a small girl who was younger than him, and even I was a little scared. He completely broke it off with her until like a year later, when he ended up knocking her up, and they were together again. Don't know if they still are, but it was scary for a bit. Not a bartender, but my mom is the financial manager for a chain of them here in Las Vegas, and occasionally tends it's something she wanted implemented a while back, but after the news started covering other places, her boss finally agreed to make it official. The problem is the bars are located in casinos in walkways around the strip, so there's no bathroom for a sign to be put up or anything like that. Point instead, two bartenders work together to ensure a girl is okay if a situation seems a little odd. One of them will offer the possibly creepy guy free drinks if he comes. Downer spins a wheel at one end of the bar, while the other tender pulls the girl to the other side of the bar to look at a menu, and then the bartender quickly asks if everything is okay and if they need to get away and come into the back office for a bit. Point, they've done it some, but it's difficult to tell because there's a lot of tourist couples, and what Americans deem kinda creepy behavior is sometimes normal elsewhere. They only got weird looks and no, I'm fine answers from the first dozen or so women they checked. Point, there was one recently where a girl said she met the guy on Tinder and was getting uncomfortable because he just kept drinking and kept getting more handsy and aggressive, so they brought her into the office. The guy she was with noticed she was gone after a second and accused the tenders of kidnapping her. He was hammered and security had to come and remove him. He called the cops, and so the bartenders had to explain themselves to the police when they showed up, but eventually the dude was asked to leave, and the police offered to drive the lady back to her hotel and escort her up to her room if she wanted.